Hello, my friends. So today I just wanted to just kind of talk to you just briefly about editing and revising, and then also just about evaluating speeches. These kind of come together and kind of create this intertwining of editing as we look at both formats, because they're both very similar ultimately on our goal of what we're trying to accomplish, which is message effectiveness. I think too often we get concerned about delivery, we get concerned about eye contact and gestures and movements and motion and voice inflection. All of that is well and good. But at the end of the day, simplicity of message and making sure that you are communicating as clearly as possible are crucial in writing and in speaking. So I just wanted to kind of go over evaluating speeches and editing and revising written work today, because I believe that that's important for Project 1 and Project 2 as we're looking at essays and at speeches. So let's go ahead and just kind of talk just briefly a little bit about the rhetorical situation. I'm going to mention it more specifically in the next slide, but the rhetorical situation, remember, is threefold. It's the rhetor, it's the audience, and we're trying to evaluate message and context, right? It's the occasion. In a speech and in an essay format, you must evaluate the rhetorical situation, and you must do a brief audience analysis and figure out who your audience is, what they desire, what you can most accurately and effectively communicate to them. And so you have to understand the context and the situation in your audience in both occasions, writing or speaking. There are a couple different roles that you're going to be fulfilling throughout the rest of the semester as you do peer reviews specifically. So I want to focus on the peer reviewer because I think that that's most crucial. As you look at just evaluating your own writing, it is important, especially when you're evaluating your own writing, to read it out loud. That's what I do, and that's how I try to kind of pinpoint mistakes. As you're reading a peer-written essay or even a peer-written outline for a speech, you can kind of bring fresh eyes to that. And so I want you to make sure that you are ethically evaluating the written and spoken word of your peers. You can do that by suggesting specific elements of improvement. Some of my least favorite peer evaluations begin and end with, "Yeah, you did well. Good job." All right. Excellent. That's great. I want you to be specific and tangible and personal in regards to just what your peers can improve on with their written and oral work. I want you to do so ethically, which means I don't want you to be degrading. I don't want you to cut them or speak down to them. But ultimately, we're all trying to improve, and peer evaluations are a significant portion of that. Remember that your comments are your comments. They're your own interpretation. What that means is that they may be right, and in many instances probably will be right, but also you are not ultimately the one who has written that essay or given that speech, so you do not understand fully what the other person's trying to communicate and trying to accomplish. So it's a matter of effectiveness. Then maybe it's just taking this other person's idea and kind of manipulating it and changing it to be, most attuned to the situation. But they are your perceptions, your interpretations. As you are trying to review, I think some really helpful questions in your textbook. Module 3.6a has a lot of different questions that you can ask as you're trying to review written work. I would encourage you to go ahead and check those out. So here's just a brief look at the rhetorical triangle, the rhetorical situation again. So you've got message, audience, and then communicator. So the rhetor, the audience, and then the message and the occasion, right? All of these must intertwine to bring about the most effective communication possible. What I mean by that is that there are a lot of different elements to speaking and writing, and I want you to remember that you are unique and you bring special gifts and abilities to a written essay or to an oral speech. And so I want you to think through what are your strengths and what are your abilities, and ultimately what is your purpose and your ethos, your credibility as you enter into a speaking or writing situation. You, the speaker, the rhetor, the writer, the communicator, bring something tangible to the table. What is it? Can you identify that? Second level is audience, being able to identify who our audience is, what they care about, how you can most effectively communicate to this audience. Remember, for your essays, I am your primary audience. For your speech, your classmates are your primary audience. And so it's going to change a little bit because your audience changes, and that's okay. And then message, just what data, evidence, reasons, specific details are you using to give a foundation and truly articulate your ultimate message? How can you most effectively communicate that to us? What details are most pertinent as you're trying to articulate your message? Make sure that the additional step in the writing process is polishing, where you're specifically working on editing and proofreading, spelling, sentence, format, grammar, punctuation, all that different kind of stuff. You must accomplish that as peer reviewers, because there are going to be a lot of things that you miss in your own writing that a peer will catch, and vice versa. So I want you to make sure that you are utilizing peer review to the best of your ability. As we evaluate speeches, we evaluate based on what I believe are 4 different areas: content, structure, presentational aids, and delivery. Now, as far as content, especially with the speeches that you're giving in this class, it's not as important that you give specific, credible, tangible facts, logos, to support your details. You're almost portraying a story to us. In Project 2, where you're kind of evaluating communities, you're going to be focusing more on just this evidential backing. But for Project 1 speech, you're going to be looking more at stories and specific details, people, events that kind of build this foundation of your self-concept. The structure is just organization. We've harped on this. You've already done some different activities that I think will lend themselves well to just organizing a speech and organizing your written work. Presentational aids, PowerPoints. You will notice I do not use a ton of PowerPoints when we meet together in class. I like them only to the extent that they are a tool and a presentational aid. They are not meant to be a crutch. You will be tempted to use your presentation aid, your PowerPoint, as a note card. I encourage you not to do that. Please do not do that. Have as few words as possible. Have images. Try to avoid death by PowerPoint and just line after line after line after line of words. That drains your audience of energy. And it also kind of detracts from you, the communicator. And then also just delivery. I think this ties hand in hand with just this idea of presentation aids. We're going to talk specifically about some delivery details throughout the remainder of the semester, but just some things that you can improve on no matter who you are. Eye contact. And, you know, it's funny. We can talk about the looking over someone and staring at their forehead because we're too afraid to stare at their eyes. I am not a believer in that. I am a believer in engaging with your audience. And by that, what I mean is that I want to give eye contact to as many people as possible. And not just staring at them awkwardly, but purposeful eye contact where I'm actually engaging. That takes a lot of practice because it's a little bit awkward for us. So I want you to kind of step back and recognize everybody in this class is nervous. Everybody who gives a speech is nervous. And a lot of times people in an audience are nervous. And so what you need to do is just recognize that, kind of plow through communication apprehension lessons the more that you give a speech. So I think that practicing will help. But I encourage you to legitimately engage with your audience and actually look at them, not through them. Another element of delivery that I think is important is vocal inflection, and that kind of ties a couple different areas together. So your vocal inflection should avoid monotone speech, where everything is exactly the same pace and volume and rate, and we're just talking like this, and it's so boring that we want to beat our head against a brick wall. You have professors that do that. I try to avoid that like the plague. Your vocal inflection, changing your volume, your pace, your rate, your pitch, can add an energy and just an interest to your speech that a lot of other elements cannot. So I want you to focus on eye contact, vocal inflection, and then also just gestures. I think a lot of times we assume, when I was in elementary school, I had a music teacher who always told me, Michael, use your hands, use your hands, use your hands. That's great. That's excellent. My philosophy on using gestures in speaking is just I want them to be as natural as possible. In a one-on-one conversation, I'm not doing this all the time, right? I might do it sometimes, depending on what the story or the conversation holds. But I want my gestures to be as natural as possible. And so we get in this habit of thinking that the more gestures we have, the better. Not necessarily true. We'll talk a little bit in class just about a speaking stance and what that looks like. Usually feet shoulder width apart. Do not put your hands in your pockets. Do not play with buttons on your shirt. Do not sit there and play. I do this a lot. I play with my wedding ring. Do not do that. Try to, and fingers especially, anything. We get nervous and we try to play with a lot of different body parts. try to avoid that. Just speak naturally, and if you don't know what to do with your hands, hold them down at your side and just be done with it, and that's okay. So as you look at that, that's what I'm evaluating your speeches on, along with what's in the rubric. But also that's what you should evaluate each other on, and that's okay to evaluate and to critique based upon those 4 different elements. Hopefully this was helpful just in looking at revising and polishing of written work, but also of just evaluating and critiquing speeches. We're going to talk more about delivery and what that looks like in the days to come. If you have any questions, please, as always, feel free to ask, but I am always here to help and to just aid in whatever way that I can. So let me know if you need anything and how I can help in any way. Have a great day.